few minutes. She would welcome you to the August Safety Council meeting. I hope she's somewhere like on a beach or a lake or something really exciting right now. But we're all here and we're watching this. So just to go through what we would normally go through, the just etiquette rules, if you could, once we get started, make sure you're on mute, and that really does help so everybody can hear our speaker. I will tell you, my sound and Jacqueline's sound was a lot louder than his, so you're probably going to want to turn up your sound. But when I jump in, or if I jump in, I'm going to seem like I'm yelling. I promise I'm not yelling at you. We will have the chat up, so if you have any questions pertaining to what the speaker's saying, then just throw them in the chat, and then we'll get to those questions at the end. And then, just turn your video off once the speaker gets going. That way we can save bandwidth and we can all hear and see what he's saying. So, our meeting agenda, obviously our welcome, nothing really big update standpoint other than, we're all still virtual for the year, really excited because we are doing the OSHA top 10 citations for the year. And so one of the top ones, if not always the top one for general industry, is hazard communication. So that's a great one for us to be able to kick off, and you guys are going to get a lot out of this. The other thing that I have, let's see, that's just stuff we go over every meeting, still going to be virtual, rebate suspended, no CEO requirement. You're just here to learn, and trust me, you're going to get something today. So that's me, safety consultant, working with you guys. Most of you I know, a lot of familiar names on there, so that's good. If you ever need me, feel free, reach out, contact anytime. At this point, we are still virtual. We're starting to get out there just a little tiny bit and very slowly. But just know that I am still here if you need something. We do still have a lot of webinars going on, a lot of virtual classes, lots of opportunities for you out there. One coming up on transitional work, one, just general claims type stuff, and life cycle of a claim coming up in October. So those are what we got coming up the next couple months. Oh, my mouse keeps jumping on me. We know today is not crazy hot out there, but, in Ohio, and I know you guys have heard me say this before, since we seem to jump between 70 and 95 and 68 and, 82, so much our workers have a harder time, their bodies getting acclimated. So it's all the much more important for folks in climates like ours here in Ohio to recognize signs and symptoms of heat-related illnesses, and OSHA has a lot of good stuff like that. If you're looking for something like that or toolbox talk, send me an email, give me a call. We can get you lots of stuff for that. As I mentioned, we have a lot of virtual classes coming up. This is just the schedule through the end of October, and I know usually after these meetings, at least one person will say, hey, give me that schedule. Feel free, hit me up, I'll send you the schedule, and I'll see if I can get the council to send it out as well when we send out the recording of this meeting. The last thing that I have is just know there's a lot of resources out there for you from the BWC. I can't talk. We have sample written programs. We have safety talks. We have research librarians that can help you find anything you've ever been looking for with safety. We have streaming video service. We have our YouTube page. There's a lot out there. So don't ever feel like you're in this alone or you're trying to figure something out alone. That's what we're here for. And I know some of you are really good about reaching out and getting information, and some of you wait too long. Don't wait. We can help you. Don't spend a lot of time researching something. We probably already have that information. All right. So the main event, what we're very excited for. So when Michael starts talking, you're going to love it because he just has this absolutely amazing accent. So if nothing else, you're going to just be completely, paying attention because of how he's saying it. But if you listen to what he's saying, you're going to get a lot out of this presentation. So like I said, this is always one of OSHA's most frequently cited standards, and there's a lot of change coming. And so that's going to be an opportunity for them to cite even more. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Kerr. And Michael, I'm going to let you just tell them a little bit about you because I'm sure you'll do it much more justice than I will. So over to you, and I'll pull your slides up.
Thanks, Carrie. And, just like everybody else that gets invited to do these kinds of things, appreciate the opportunity to provide, shall I say, your audience with some additional insight into in this very important topic. You're right, it still is the #1 cited standard by OSHA in general industry. My name is Michael Kerr, MAKSolve, MAKSolve. Basically, a bunch of drunken attorneys got together about 14 years ago and said, Michael, all you do is solve people's problems. Another guy came up with MAKSolve, and lo and behold, our company was formed. I'm retired British Australian Navy, served in the United States Navy in Vietnam for about 9 months. And I am a US citizen, proud of that. And I've been doing this for about 35 years. Love it, love helping people out, love answering questions. And if I can't get the answer, I will find it. We've been in business about 14 years. I got a couple of degrees, environmental and master's. That's an MBA, I think. I have to look on my wall. It's been a long time. But anyway, again, appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys about what I feel is a very important standard, and it's about ready to change as well. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to give you a brief update or a little bit historical perspective, if you will, of the hazard communication standard, why it came about. I'm going to give you a teaser, if you will, regarding the proposed changes that are coming about. They've been announced in the Federal Register, and I anticipate them coming out at the end of the year or early next year. Going to give you a little primer on how HAZCOM works. Going to get into a little tiny bit more in depth about the training. When I get hired by folks, it's the training where they typically get cited. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the labeling, because the labeling is very important. And again, labeling, I'm sorry, I'm talking, so I need something to drink here. Hope you don't mind. This is great stuff on a Tuesday afternoon. But I'm going to give you an insight into some labeling, talk about pictograms. I'll give you an insight into safety data sheets, but there's 16 sections, and I'm not going to go through every single one of them. When you get this presentation, you can investigate that yourself. What I like doing is giving people resources. Because if you've got information or access to information, you can provide your workplace more insight and be more safe for your workers and what have you. And I'll take some questions at the end of it. And oh, by the way, this is all about labeling. You see, it says Crown Royal, but it's really ginger ale. So I remember doing that at a presentation about 20 years in the Grand Ole Opry. I had a bottle of bourbon, and I started to drink that. And the people, it was 9 o'clock in the morning, and people were rather interested. Until I told them that's why you have to label stuff properly. But anyway, Carrie, we're moving on, and we'll go ahead and talk about the history of the hazard communication standard. I don't know how many have read this book. It's called Bhopal, Anatomy of a Crisis. It's an in-depth study, a great safety document, if you will, regarding what happened in Bhopal, India, back in 1984, when at the Union Carbide plant down there, which was built in 1969, basically the night of December the 2nd, 1984, water was inadvertently introduced to a tank of methyl isocyanate, and the resulting exothermic reaction increased the temperature in the tank to the safety valves blew, and a cloud of methyl isocyanate descended upon the residents of Bhopal, India. The data that I currently have indicate that, and this is from the government, that immediately 3,787 people died. Over 8,000 were affected in the coming months, but 558,000 people were somewhat impacted by that hazardous chemical incident in Bhopal, India. There's a typographical error on this presentation. That should really read 1985, not 08, but in Institute, West Virginia. Can you believe it? The same kind of incident happened in the town of Institute, where chemicals were mixed inadvertently. And again, another cloud of methyl isocyanate descended upon the town, and 135 people were impacted by that. 100 and let me see, 120, 100, out of the 135, 24 had to be hospitalized. Again, people working with chemicals, not knowing the reaction of those chemicals or not being trained in how to manage those chemicals. And as a result, you have these two horrific incidents causing significant death. About an hour and a half ago, when I looked at this presentation and I saw chemical usage in the occupational environment, I had not thought about it as to whether the United States government has done any in-depth investigation or assessment of other chemical incidents in the United States following the Institute West Virginia one. And lo and behold, last year, the Center for Disease Control did in fact write a report. This is just last year, 2020. But this report is reflective of chemical incidents occurring in the United States between 2010 and 2014. And they only looked, it's critical, they only looked at 9 states, and Ohio was not one of them. But out of those 9 states that they looked at, they found 22,342 incidents of chemically related, not knowing hazard communication, employees doing something wrong with chemicals. 22,342. As a result of those incidents, 6,635 people were injured and 190 died. This does not have to happen because, as I said, this is 2010 through 2014. And in 2012, OSHA introduced the huge revision to the hazard communication standard that I had hoped would take those kinds of incidents and negate them, but it didn't. But the global harmonization system has been in place for quite some time. The whole context of the standard, the United Nations standard, is to harmonize the definition of hazards, to define specific criteria for labels, and again to harmonize what was formerly material safety data sheets, but are now referred to as safety data sheets. And by harmonizing and providing specific criteria, no matter where you are on the planet, everybody will have the same information. Everyone will have the same information regarding the classification of physical hazards, the environmental and or health hazards associated with chemicals. And it's all through the process of hazard communication. 2 words. Flip it around. It's the communication of hazards. Hazards associated with the chemicals that we come into contact with on a day-to-day basis. And that was the foundation for the 1986 OSHA Hazard Communication Standard, which was revolutionary in nature. OSHA had never issued such a standard before. But the GHS is very fluid. It changes every 2 years. The 1986 standard was based upon the 3rd edition of the GHS. So in 2012, OSHA revised the standard to accommodate a lot more changes that have come about. It was a major change to an OSHA standard. And as Carrie said, it's still, I just can't get my head around it with all the information that OSHA has out there for employers in the public and the private sector, that in general industry, it's still #1 cited standard when it's so easy to accommodate. But as I mentioned earlier, this is a fluid standard. And as a result of that, let me see here, on February the 16th, 2021, OSHA announced a proposed rule and a request for comments. For all of you who are interested, this is 255 pages of 3-column Federal Register. But what I want to reinforce with everybody here is that 107 pages of this Federal Register in 3 columns are the actual changes that will come about in late 2021 or 2022. So it behooves everybody here to look at that rule. And I'm going to provide you with a little tiny bit of it, because what OSHA has done, they have incorporated the GHS revision #7 in its entirety and parts of revision #8. So this is a quantum leap whereby OSHA has taken a very proactive mode or position, stance, whatever you like to call it, to provide you, the employer, and your employees with the latest and greatest in hazard communication. And why do they do this? Well, the proposed hazard communication standard, as is everything else when they do enhance these things, are to enhance worker protection. They provide additional clarification of existing regulatory requirements. There's new hazard classes. There's new categories. They've also improved the streamlining, if you will, of the precautionary statements. And what I mean about that is their prioritization. If you ever go to a grocery store and you pick up a bottle, let's just say, of salad dressing, look on the back of that label and you'll see the order of predominance there, what each component of that salad dressing is, from the biggest to the smallest component. Well, OSHA is doing pretty much the same by putting the most important aspects, the most important precautionary statements up front. And as you'll see, when you look at that, they're primarily medical. But the basic framework, as you can see in this next slide, Kerry, this basic framework of HAZCOM is going to remain the same. Chemical manufacturers, importers, distributors will still be responsible for providing information about the identities and the hazards of chemicals they produce or import. And all employers will have required to have a hazard communication program in place. You should already have it in place, and provide your employees then with what it is that's going on and what they can do to protect themselves, PPE and those kinds of things. So what am I talking about when I say stand by for changes in 2021? As I said, what is it? 255 pages there. I've read it twice now, and I'm still befuddled, but you'll need to look at it and get down into it. Hazard class and category. What they did not identify is the synergistic effect, if you will, of chemicals when they're mixed and they change form. Not unlike what happened in the 2 incidents I referenced. What you had there was chemicals being introduced to other chemicals and a reaction. So in the hazard class and category section of the revised HAZCOM, you will see a requirement for importers and manufacturers to provide some sense of what happens if you're mixing chemicals or if disparate chemicals spill and mix. The biggest changes on label is there's an additional requirement now for you to put on that label the date the chemical was released for shipment. And this is primarily for distributors or importers who keep it in a warehouse for some time. You need to put the date of when it was initially released for shipment. OSHA's still keeping the DOT and the pictograms will still remain the same there. But one of the biggest changes is in small containers. If anything is above 100 milliliters, you have to have a full label on there that describes all the new changes to the labeling standard. However, if it's less than 3 milliliters, go figure how big that is. Try putting that label. No, you don't have to do that. So they're asking you to put that on the packaging or a little pull-out label that's attached to the bottle. Those are specific changes and they're critical, especially for importers and manufacturers. On the safety data sheets, there's going to be some changes regarding the concentrations. A lot of chemical manufacturers did not want their product to be reverse engineered. So the concentrations are now a trade secret. And the concentrations of those chemicals can be given in ranges, and there will be specific ranges, very prescriptive ranges. And the reason behind that is because this is a global harmonized program, and Canada had a great program up there. So that was adopted by the United Nations and has now become a major component of the safety data sheet as it has been in Canada. As we go to other changes, I strongly recommend that if you are a manufacturer, if you are a distributor, if you are an importer of chemicals, that you read every single one of these changes to Appendix A, B, C, and D. And more importantly, Appendix D, the safety data sheets, where there's now a requirement for safety data sheets to be in English. And that in the Section 1, the information be for the United States. So if you manufacture the product in Germany, you cannot put a Germany telephone number, address, or name of the manufacturer. You have to put information in the United States. United States telephone numbers, zip codes, and a name of the manufacturer in the United States. That's in the safety data. Lots of other things, PELs, TLVs have to be put in there. And if there's a reaction of the chemical, as I mentioned earlier, from a spill, if you know what that might be, based upon typical usage of that chemical, you have to put that in there. Technologically, as we all see every single day, and I'm still using my iPhone 6. My daughter wants to buy me an iPhone 10 for Christmas. So I probably, as an old bugger, I'll go ahead and learn how to use one of those. But as we've gone through this pandemic, how many people have gone to a restaurant and tried to get a menu and they say, no, you have to pick up your phone, turn on your camera, and get the QR code. Well, it looks like here in the near future, a lot of the information that's on a safety data sheet can be captured in a QR code, or the QR code will send you off to a safety data sheet. So that is in the works. It's not there currently, but it also is going to help manufacturers to put a lot of information into a document and not have to label or provide a safety data sheet. You can just hit a QR code, and they're looking at that in the future. So we talked a lot about the basis of the hazard communication standard. We've talked about the criticality of training your people, what's coming down the pike. But the basic structure of a hazard communication program, again, is very simplistic. Manufacturers, chemical manufacturers or importers, they classify the hazards of the chemicals. Those chemicals are shipped to us in general industry or whatever, even to other manufacturers or distributors for distribution to the occupational environment. And within the occupational environment, all employers, should receive a safety data sheet with that chemical. That chemical should be labeled. And that chemical label and that chemical safety data sheet should be incorporated into a written hazard communication program. And what you need to do there is basically look at all containers, make sure they're labeled, get safety data sheets for every single chemical in the workplace, and train your employees so they are more knowledgeable and can apply the necessary protective measures to protect themselves so they go home in the evening without being impacted by the chemicals that they come into contact with on a day-to-day basis. And how do you protect them? Training. OSHA is very specific in the hazard communication standard as to what constitutes formal training for employees. Training must cover the requirement of the regulations. Share with your employees the hazardous chemicals that are being used in the workplace, the methods that you have internally to detect a release, and how you would respond to a release, a spill, or an inappropriate or whatever mixture of chemicals. How would you deal with that? Teach your employees about the physical and health hazards associated with the chemicals that are there and what PPE they can wear. Now, the labeling system is fairly straightforward, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And the GHS labels and pictograms are very straightforward, and that's why they did it. But you have to share that information with your employees. And where is it? Where can they go to get that kind of information? Where's the location of the safety data sheets? Make it available in their lunchroom or in their workplace. And if you want to, on a piece of equipment that has hazardous chemicals in it, you could put safety data sheets there, attach them to the machine. And obviously, in the training, go through the specific details of your workplace hazard communication written plan and where it is. Provide your employees, if you want to, with an executive summary of the written plan or the whole plan itself. Most plans that we do here are around 16 pages long, and we provide that to all our clients' employees. But before you can write the plan, what is the first step? Well, it's to know what the heck it is you've got in your workplace. Hazardous chemicals are everywhere. We use them every single day. I'm looking around my office right now. Okay, here's a hazardous chemical. Contains 80% alcohol. It's a hand sanitizer of some sort. If I recall, I've got some whitening, some whitener here. It's a hazardous chemical. Latest information I've got is that there's over 720,000 chemical products out there, and you can find them everywhere. Healthcare, commercial, the commercial business sector, in government, and obviously in industry. So I strongly recommend the first step is to conduct a thorough inventory assessment. Get yourself an Excel spreadsheet together. Put a numbering system down the left-hand side. Put the chemical down there, the manufacturer, distributor, where you get it from. Identify the hazards based upon I might suggest the pictograms, or use, assigning a number or whatever, or use the product identifier and make that information accessible to all employees. Put it in your written program, because it's going to help you once you build a spreadsheet. Because in this new change, proposed revision, there's an opportunity to cluster chemicals into their specific hazards, physical or health, flammable. And that way, through that labeling process and through that identification, you can say, okay, we've got 20 chemicals and they're all flammable. Let's talk about flammability. Or we got 30 chemicals that have the opportunity to provide you or to give you some kind of health impact. So talk about those health impacts on those chemicals and cluster them that way. But make sure that everything in your workplace is labeled. Everything. Obviously, if it's a portable container, it's being used immediately, like a transfer container or something like that, that is an exception to the rule. But personally, when I see people taking a milk jug and filling it up out of a 55-gallon drum and using a quart of it and then leaving the rest of the gallon jug on their workbench, and who the heck knows what's in there, and then shift change comes around, no, I strongly recommend putting a label even on a transfer container. I will warn you, however, that it is an OSHA violation, citable, if you remove a label on a container, unless that container is completely empty and you're using it for another purpose, and therefore that label is inappropriate. And as I mentioned earlier, there are some revisions in the new proposed standard regarding small containers. So let's have a look at a label, okay? Typical label, what you have here is the OSHA and the GHS required information. And Carrie, you can see that, the product identifier. What's the name of the chemical? A signal word, very, very critical. Put a signal word in there. In this case, I've got danger. Put some hazard statements in there. Provide the label with pictograms. And they're in the top right-hand corner here. Precautionary statements. Again, those should now be in the form of the order of predominance. You look at this label, it says precautionary statements, keep container tightly closed, okay? But if you look further down, it says do not breathe vapors. So this label, should the changes, the revisions to the OSHA standard come into play, this label is not appropriate, because now you have to bring the medical conditions to the forefront. Wash hands thoroughly after handling. That's another medical, focused precautionary statement. You are required to put the name, the address, and the phone number, and it has to be a United States of America address and phone number. And then the major revision, especially for manufacturers and distributors, is in the bottom or somewhere on that label, you put the date of release. So those are some of the changes to the labeling information. You still can use the NFPA HMS system, which we all know and we understand what that is, but that cannot replace the GHS labeling requirements adopted by OSHA. Pictograms, we'll talk quickly because we're running out of time about pictograms, but why do we have pictograms? It's because this is an international standard, and I'm not taking away from everyone on this call and their capability to read and write, but there are others that are not. So training employees on a pictogram, a picture, and explaining to them what it is. And if all they see is that pictogram, the health hazard, the flame, the exclamation mark, the gas cylinder, the corrosion label, or corrosion pictogram, sorry, or the exploding bomb, or the flame over, or the skull and crossbones, they'll know that if they see a skull and crossbones, that could be fatal or toxic to them. Take the appropriate action. So we've gone to pictures just in case they can't read. And finally, I just want to close on safety data sheets. As I mentioned, in Appendix D of the GHS, I would say out of that 107 pages that are actually going to be revised in the upcoming standard, about 80 of them pertain to safety data sheets. So if you are a manufacturer, if you are an importer, if you are a distributor, you will need to read those and change your safety data sheets accordingly. The format of the safety data sheets, sections 1 through 16 have not changed, but I strongly recommend that you look at section 11, the toxicological information, first aid measures in section 4, and in section 3, the composition and information on ingredients, because those I do know have changed significantly. So basically, that's the hazard communication standard. So what I've done here is I've kind of given you a little tiny bit of a primer on the requirements of the regulations, why you need to inventory the hazardous chemicals in your workplace, because that's the foundation of a HAZCOM program. Train your employees about the methods that you're utilizing to detect releases of chemicals, categorize those chemicals as physical or health hazards. It'll help you in training. Identify the personal protective equipment. Focus on labeling. Tell your employees where the safety data sheets are. Detail and location of the hazard communication program. And by the way, let's do that all by next Monday. Okay? All right. In closing out, you guys need something else, and I'm happy to provide you with some additional resources. OSHA has a wonderful website, osha.gov/HAZCOM. It's everything you ever wanted. The state of Michigan has done a fantastic job because they're like HAZCOM on steroids. A lot of information just by clicking on these two documents, and it's the same with Tennessee. So with that, I'll stop talking and I'll hand it back to Kerr. And I'm open for any questions that there may be.
Okay, so I did put, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat. Thank you so much, Michael. I know we love the accent, the content, the information is so great. And I think you really threw everybody off at the beginning with the Crown Royal bottle. So I think you really got their attention there. That's great. I know one question I get a lot whenever I go out and do walkthroughs or when we're talking about labeling, I have a lot of people ask often, well, I have a can or a container, whether it's single use, and I'm with you. I don't like it when they don't label. I want them to label. I don't like I'm going to use the whole thing, and they never do. We know that. Or they go to the bathroom or change shifts or whatever. So I'm with you. I want them to label it all the time. I often get asked, well, I have a container that, anytime you put a label on it, it comes right off. Or, the label will get covered up because of whatever the chemical is. It wipes it off, or, things like that. And one of the things that I always have with me is this little metal, it almost looks like a dog tag. And I tell folks, this is a great thing. You can even like etch stuff in there, and then that won't go anywhere, and attach that to the bottle. Any other tips or tricks or ideas that you've come across for folks when they have a container that's really hard to label?
Yeah, sometimes what we do, and not unlike your dog tag example there, is you make a little tiny label and laminate it, stick a hole in it. We do it here for clients. They're luggage tags. They're luggage tags. We make a little tiny label based upon the larger container's information, make a little tiny label about the size of a business card. I don't have any with me here, but at the size of a business card, you can put it on the front and the back, all the information, laminate that, and it's got a little hole in there, and tie it around the neck of the bottle. And we found that to be very successful. But yeah, I understand what people say. It's impossible for me to keep a label on this container, okay? Well, it's a citation. And for the sake of 5 minutes of effort, is that worth, I just received it, January 1, OSHA increased all their citations. And so now you've got a range of, what is it, $948 to $13,700, dependent upon the severity of the citation. Thank you for the acceleration. It went up quite a bit, actually. But is it worth that when all you have to do is get a little bit creative? Spend 5 minutes, figure out a way to label that container that you are finding difficult to label.
Absolutely. No, good. We did get one question. So the secondary container has to have a release date on it. Is that correct, or is it only the primary container?
The primary container.
Awesome. Okay, so they don't have to worry about the secondary container on that. I know another question that I get a lot, and please type your questions in here. I know we all have questions around hazard communication, because this is a topic, especially when it comes to chemicals. A lot of times folks don't feel real comfortable with it. So now is your opportunity to ask an expert. Another question that I get really frequently when I'm out and about is they'll say, okay, so I have to do training, and you went through all the steps that you have to train. And they'll ask, do I have to train every employee on every chemical I have?
I visited a manufacturing plant about 2 months ago, and I conducted hazard communication training. There was an accountant in the hazard communication program in the classroom, and she was adamant, actually kind of ticked me off a little bit, but she was adamant that she did not need to be trained in hazard communication because she never got exposed to chemicals in the workplace. So I asked her a very simple question. How does the company distribute paychecks? She said, well, that's my job. And I said, okay, how do you do it? She said, well, I go out there and I walk through the plant and I give everyone, I make sure every single employee gets their paycheck and I hand it to them. I said, really? Where do you go down there? She says, yes, I do. I said, do you go over there? Yes, I do. Do you go to building B? And she goes, yes, I did. And I said, okay, fine. So what you're telling me is that you have now been exposed to every single chemical in that workplace, that the potential existed should a spill or a release occur for you to be exposed to that particular chemical. If a hose broke on a hydraulic system, there was sudden quiet in the room. And we went on about the training. My point being, to me, every single employee in a manufacturing or even a commercial enterprise or even in an office environment, there are hazards there associated with chemicals. OSHA cites you for not teaching your employees about the hazards associated with the chemicals in the copier machine. The big long tubes of ink, believe me. So bottom line, train everybody. It's a couple of hours out of everybody's day, but then you're covered. Most importantly, document the fact that you trained them and get them to sign a document that they were trained on a specific day.
Absolutely. I know we had a situation, one of our other consultants had worked with a wedding dress shop who had been cited by OSHA because they had shoe dye and they didn't have a HAZCOM program or train their employees on the hazards of it. So absolutely, it's something that applies to everybody, and they don't always recognize it. One more question, and then we'll definitely let you off the hook here. But the last question that I have in here is, they currently make a company that currently makes their own labels manually at this point. Do you have any recommendations or good options for programs or systems to use to make labels, especially in light of these changes that are coming?
I'm not one to refer people to a specific organization, or manufacturer of labels. There's a lot of them out there. Some you can work with and have your personalized label made on rolls or whatever it is for whatever chemical it is. The simplest way, and obviously dependent upon how many chemicals you got, is to create your own label in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or something like that. So as the label evolves with new information, you can in-house change it. Go to Staples and buy yourself those sticky labels. We have them here. And whenever you need a label, just print it out and have an archive on your computer of all your chemical products and the labels associated with them. And that way you are in charge. You can change them in accordance with the revisions that are coming down. You can add or subtract information as the importer or the distributor or whatever, or however you get your information. You can change it in real time. I would just strongly recommend that if you're doing it in-house, is when you do find a new piece of information, when a new precautionary statement is provided for that particular product, that you ensure that all the chemicals that you've got in-house in your warehouse, that you change those labels accordingly. So they have, whoever is using it has the most up-to-date information available to them.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Michael. This was phenomenal. Lots of good questions. Sometimes this is a really quiet group, so I think you really pulled them out of their shell. We definitely appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with us. And next month, we will be September 21st. So just note, it seems a little bit later, but it's just of where Tuesdays fall in September. So the thing that's really going to be neat, and I know you're jumping off, but wait 1 second. September 21st, we're doing ladder safety training. So I really strongly encourage you. We're actually using Little Giant, and they have a studio. I think it's in Texas, and we're going to be actually joining them live. So if you have folks that use ladders, you might want to either send them the link to the meeting, or you might want to have them register separately, which is all free to register. Or you could have like a viewing party and buy your folks lunch and pull them together and view the ladder safety training all together. So we'll send out more information about that. That's September 21st. I appreciate it. I hope everybody has a fun and safe Labor Day, and I look forward to seeing you all. We'll send out the presentation recording and the slides, and you have my contact information. You'll have Michael's if you have questions as well. So thank you guys so much. If you see your reaction tab down at the bottom of your screen, go ahead and give a clap, a virtual clap there to Michael. Thank you so much. Look at that. They're all lighting the screen up for us. Thank you so much. I got a thumbs up there. Thank you guys. You have a wonderful rest of the week. Yay, look at that. Party hats and everything, Michael.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. So thank you.
We appreciate it. Have a good day.